This is Mythological Mayhem by Amanda Gross. The summary for this game is 3 children from 3 different ancient civilizations play with magical forces they do not understand, angering gods and goddesses of their time and civilizations. The gods retaliate by placing all of them together inside of a different world, and they must solve puzzles, work together to battle various magical creatures and the gods themselves in order to return home. Players have familiar core actions. Adjustments are made to fit the character's specific mythology and weapons, but walk, run, fight, magic, and melee attacks, jump, collect, dodge, crouch, swim, and each character has a special ability. The goals of this game are as follows. The main goal is to defeat all the gods and win the game. Sub-goals is to find the scrolls, the artifacts to each level, and this enhances the narrative and level progression, helps you defeat the bosses and the other enemies. From moment to moment is just level exploration and combat. For the unique selling points of this game, there are scrolls inside. I did a little picture of one, so I don't really have to have a reference since I made the picture and I made the scrolls. But they have information from Egyptian, Greek, and Norse culture and myths. Players are asked questions and riddles based on the information found on these scrolls, and this increases the player's learning historical myth and historical nonfiction. The scrolls are detrimental. They're beneficial to the player's level progression. The game also has this unique camera switching ability between levels. It'll go from a 2D game, from a regular platformer, main gameplay, but when you hit bosses and you hit the labyrinth, it goes into a 3D camera mode. My first feature to be discussed is 2D character animations. They are core for this system for the gameplay because you have to have animations or else your characters won't work. The animations include animations for all the core actions, the fight, dodge, jump, collect, and so forth. They each have a special ability too within their character. They are necessary for the player to see the action that is being performed during gameplay. Criteria completion is for artists to upload them, programmers to animate inside the game, and game tests could be run to make sure that they are running as expected. And these are all self-made, so I did not have any references. My next feature is 2D enemy animations, kind of similar to the character animations. The enemies need to be able to, the player needs to be able to see that the enemies are moving, attacking, or when they kill them. So it is a core feature. It is very much needed. Without enemies, you can't exactly have a game. Each enemy needs a movement, attack, and death animations inside of the game. And all these are self-made, so I didn't have to have a reference to them. Test is, again, the artists, did they animate them? Did the programmers animate them inside of Engine? And then can the game testers see that these enemies are heading toward player, attacking player when needed to be? And then are they killed correctly within the game? My next feature that I decided to talk about was the different levels of gameplay. There are 4 levels of gameplay in this game, and it lets the player experience each of the characters' civilizations. Game testers can make sure that each level is playable and that it is appropriate to each civilization. I designed these, but I did reference Mickey Mousecapade because this ship looks a little bit like Mickey Mousecapade. I took that as inspiration, but all of these are self-made civilizations, self-made pictures with inside Photoshop that I did. The levels would be considered core game because you have to have levels in order to play the game. Artifacts are kind of a big deal within this game. They can be found near the end of the levels, and they are needed in order to help defeat bosses within inside the levels of the game. Criteria completion is a test to see do they use this, does this work correctly when defeating the boss. They are part of a core system since they are needed to defeat the bosses, and I have referenced where I found each of these artifacts. Another feature this game will have is a mana bar. Mana bar is just the icon, a little bar. It tells you how much mana you have left. shows the player the remaining mana left to cast spells. The criteria completion is that there's a GIF of the man, or there's a PNG of the mana bar, and does it work appropriately inside the engine? Does it reset over a time period and give more mana within power-ups? It's not quite considered core game, but it's a very helpful extra to gameplay. And I used a reference from a place called the Mana Bar as a picture, as a chosen picture for this mana bar. This game has a magical system. It depends on which character is used as to how the player is affected by this magical system. They each have their own special magical attack ability, and it'll have a completion criteria of does it attack when you press the button, and does it have an appropriate cooldown method, so game testers could test that out to make sure that's implemented correctly. This would be considered core gameplay since the special attacks and their artifacts together are needed in order to defeat bosses within the game. The idea for this is kind of from the Diablo series, that they have special magical abilities and attacks. The last feature that I would like to talk about inside this game is the audio feedback feature. It gives the player feedback through the auditory senses of the game's events. Music sounds when you solve a puzzle correctly. It has death sounds and grunts when a player is hit or when an enemy is defeated. Completion criteria is when the game testers test it. Can they hear these sounds being played when they defeat the enemy, when they solve the puzzle correctly? It would not be exactly a core feature, but it would be a cool extra add-on to help with inside the game. And auditory feedback can be found inside the Journal of Sound and Music of Games. It's a highly respected journal inside this community, the game studios, and it concerns sound effects inside of games.